When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject: Memories of LA. User: GreenSegPR. Posted August 13th, 1994.
My introduction to all this X-Files type stuff happened back when I was growing up in LA. The first thing happened when I was maybe 6 or 7 years old, and it's carried through to today. For now, I'll start with my first two experiences, and maybe one day I'll share more. This would have been around 1981 or 82, somewhere thereabouts. It was the middle of the summer and hot as hell. We couldn't afford an air conditioner, but my dad worked at Leo's Stereo near Busch Gardens, so we still had a great hi-fi setup to listen to while we melted. The night this took place was particularly rough. I remember laying in bed sweating instead of sleeping and looking up at the moon. It was full or close to it and brighter than I ever remembered seeing it before. From the living room, I could hear my dad and Uncle Luis laughing while they played Isabel Pantoja records. They were both chain smokers, always Marlboros, and even though my door was closed, I could smell whiffs of tobacco. I never picked up the habit, thank God, but to this day, if I smell Marlboros, I flash right back to being a kid. Anyway, as I was saying, I was laying there in bed looking at the moon. The window was right next to me, close enough I could touch it if I wanted to. Just as I was feeling like sleep could be a possibility, I noticed a white circle of paper the size of a silver dollar floating in the air above me. I blinked a couple times in case there was something in my eye, but no, it was still there. It was the weirdest thing, and I tried reaching out my hand to grab it, but it kind of juked to one side. Figuring I'd moved too quickly and accidentally brushed it aside, I slowly reached back out, but the circle of paper dodged me again. I tried a few more times, and every single time it would move as if it was intelligently avoiding me. I put my hand down and watched as the little circle vibrated like a leaf in the wind, then floated out the open window. The craziest thing is, you figure something like this would really rev a kid up, but instead of thinking about it at all, after it disappeared, I just went to sleep. I never saw that thing again, but it was the start of what's been a pretty weird life. There was one time my dad and uncle took me out on a night drive in Uncle Luis's convertible, which I loved, but didn't happen often. LA is a completely different place at night, and I remember seeing things for which I had zero context. We'd cruise through Hollywood, and there were dangerous-looking men dealing 3-card Monte on little folding tables, or a place with lots of red lights called the Cave. I thought that had something to do with Captain Caveman, but no, it did not. My next experience with the supernatural happened on one of those drives. We were up in a part of the hills Dad said was called Laurel Canyon, and even though it was a clear night with houses on either side of the road, the darkness was oppressive. Neither Dad nor Uncle Luis said anything, but I felt on edge like someone was watching us, and they weren't happy we were there. When Dad told Luis to pull over so he could take a leak, I was genuinely terrified. Not because I thought we'd get in trouble, but because whatever had been with us the entire time might decide to show itself. I was right. While Dad stood in the bushes and did his business, I watched a figure emerge from the darkness across the road. Somehow, I knew right away it wasn't a man, at least a living one. Not least because the entire time, Uncle Luis never once noticed him, despite looking his way several times. He looked vaguely Native American, or at least that was the closest I could come to describing him back then. He had long white hair down to his waist and wore a tattered robe that might once have been white. His face was sunken and deeply lined, as if he'd kept aging even in death. His eyes would have been hidden amidst the worn folds of flesh if not for the fact that they were a bright ice blue and burned with what I can only describe as hatred. I don't know if that hatred was directed at us, the world, or something beyond, but I will never forget that look. The eyes burned into me for at least a minute, maybe two, then Dad slammed the car door as he got back in, and the man was gone. Uncle Luis fired up the engine a second after that, and we were off back into the LA night.
Subject, Good Bones. User, MMR23X. Posted, April 8, 1996.
When my wife Donna and I bought this house, it wasn't in great shape, but we saw it had good bones and knew we could knock it into shape together. We closed on the property in December of '93, and thanks to an early spring, we started the renovation in March of '94. I'd like to say the project was a dream, but we hit a few snags along the way. Electrical issues, stolen tools, leaky gas lines, all of which were manageable, but took enough time we weren't able to move in until September. Truth be told, we still hadn't quite got the electrical issue under control quite yet, but we could handle some flickering lights if it meant getting out of the fifth wheel we'd been living in all summer. Donna has a knack for designing living spaces, especially lighting, and I love watching her work. Within 2 weeks, our house actually started to feel like home, and we breathed a collective sigh of relief. Of course, we forgot the golden rule of renovation. When you think you're done, you're not, and we're reminded of that fact at dinner when we heard a huge crash from above us. In the upstairs bathroom, I found a fixture Donna had chosen, an 8-bulb light bar from above the vanity, smashed against the far wall. The fixture was so obviously a write-off, the metal base twisted beyond repair, bulbs smashed into powder, that it was hard to believe it had fallen on its own. Thinking maybe our tool thieves had returned to up their game, I checked every single door, window, and closet, but there was no one to be found. There wasn't much to do but toss everything out, sweep up the mess, and grab new lights from Rickle on the weekend. They didn't have the same one, so Donna picked out something different, and so far it's stayed in place. You might be wondering how we didn't clue in that something unusual was happening in our house, but neither of us are particularly religious or into scary things, so the notion that a refurbished gem of a house was haunted never occurred to us. As far as the light goes, I thought maybe I hadn't wired it properly and it had overheated enough for the metal to bend out of shape when it fell. In retrospect, it does seem like a silly assumption to make. The basement door was what finally clued us into the possibility we may not be alone here. It's a holdover from the original house, a big, heavy piece of black walnut that would have cost us a fortune to buy new. It has an old forged latch on it, but no matter how many times we made sure to lock it when we went to bed, it would be unlatched and open in the morning. The first time it happened, I did the same as I had when the fixture fell. Checked every door, window, and closet in the house, but nothing was missing or out of order. The only possible explanation seemed to be that we hadn't latched it before bed, so the next night we double-checked it before going upstairs. That morning, there it was again, lolling open at the far end of the kitchen. Even though no one seemed to be getting in, this was unnerving, and we eventually bought a door wedge to keep it shut. It didn't make a damn bit of difference. Every night, we'd kick the wedge in as far as it could go. Every morning, it would be on its side, and the basement door would be ajar. It was Donna's friend Rachel who suggested that we might have a ghost. The girls were having a wine night, and I was just about to head over to the Forum to catch a Titans game when Donna called me into the living room. "What's up, Don?" "Hey, Rachel." Rachel smiled at me. "Hey, Billy." Rachel thinks she knows what's going on with the basement door. "Oh? I didn't know you were handy, Rach." Rachel blushed a little while Donna gestured toward me with her wine glass. "Go on, tell him." "Maybe you have a ghost," Rachel said quietly. I chuckled. "A ghost, like a Ghostbusters ghost?" The red in her cheeks deepened. "Not quite like that. My college roommate had one. We were hanging out, reading magazines, and I went into her kitchen for something. There was an old man standing there. He had an old-style suit on, maybe from the 30s or something. I was startled because I thought we were alone, but just assumed it was her grandpa or something. I said hi and asked if he was there to see my friend. He just smiled at me and disappeared." "Disappeared, as in faded away?" She shook her head. No. 1 second he was there, the next he was gone. I was just stunned, but when I went and told my friend, she just said, "Oh yeah, that's my ghost." Like it was the most normal thing in the world, so maybe you've got one of your own. I didn't put much stock into it, but I agreed that anything was possible and excused myself. Donna was asleep when I got back, but she brought it up again the next morning. "What if we do have a ghost, Bill?" "I mean, I don't know. What did Rachel say we should do?" "She said we should talk to it like we would another person. Just say that we're okay sharing the house with it so long as it respects us and doesn't hurt or frighten us. Like it tried to do with the light fixture." Donna smiled sheepishly. "I did say that to Rachel, and she said the new fixture was much better. Maybe the ghost just wanted to have a say in how we decorate." I threw up my hands. What could it hurt? "Sure. Why not? What do we do?" Donna said we had to go into the kitchen, which we did. She then said out loud to no one in particular that whoever was in the house was welcome to stay, but we live there too now. We love the house just as much as they did, and if they wanted something changed or didn't like something we'd done, we were willing to fix it as long as they didn't tell us in a way that was destructive or frightening. She also said that we would prefer the basement door stays closed because having it open lets the heat out into the basement. The whole thing seemed nuts to me, but after it was all said and done, Donna was satisfied, which meant I was too. And it was the damnedest thing. The following morning, the door was shut, and it stayed that way every morning since. The lights have stopped flickering too. Go figure.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr. with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.